1 minute until showtime. Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Love Talk Radio.
Now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is a very real prospect of a new world order. The new world order does not mean surrendering our national sovereignty or forfeiting our interests. He took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. By some, he's been called controversial. How can I convince you when your ears are still here? You turn your heart away from me each time that I draw near. You're right to me with my big life away in fear. Now, keep in mind that some of my guys have been approached by Homeland Security or FBI saying, why are you going over the Clay Douglas show? My message to those guys, if they're listening this morning, is go get a cup of coffee. Maybe you'll learn something. We don't decide to defend the Constitution against all other foreign and domestic. I don't recall there being an expiration date on that. He is the free American, Clay Douglas. That's the Free American, weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern. Every time I think about the damage that's been done, the anger was inside me till I'm almost overcome. I want to down the moon out of the sky and drop the For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamericans.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-999-8631.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American. And this may be, I think, one of the most important shows that I've done. You may not want to accept it, but accepting the truth is pretty hard. And I've made references to this. I've talked about this in the shows that I've done over the last 20 years. I've told you that 45 years ago I wrote some novels. One of them, actually, it was just a short story. It's grown a little bit since then. About a civilization far beyond, much further advanced than ours. I made that into a screenplay for HBO. They said they wanted it, but the lawyer that was handling the deal tried to take too much, and I wouldn't go for it. So I still have that, and it's available. It was called The Future Past. I also did a novel about science fiction at the time, about a land in the future, a time in the future, when the United States had stopped arresting people for marijuana. It was so far out at the time, in the 60s, that didn't sell, couldn't get a publisher. And yet today, what started out as science fiction is happening now. You can now smoke pot in 20 states if you bribe a doctor, and in 2 states, you can do it without having to bribe anybody. You can grow in your front yard without going to prison, like I did. But I've gathered information, and even one of my father-in-laws, one of them got involved with Billy Saul Estes. He was a real crook, colonel in the Army. Another father-in-law, another colonel in the Marines, Marine colonel, and he happened to be the one that escorted the extraterrestrial biological entity that survived the Roswell crash. He escorted him to Truman's office, among other places. Now, I've come across this information. It's up on my Facebook. It's a link there. You should really read it. Tell people about my Facebook site, Facebook, Free American 69. And this video, which will be up on YouTube, and you need to tell people about this. I've made the remark, somewhat flippantly, that the reason that the UFOs are so top secret is that they don't want you to know we could have lunch on the moon and be back in time for dinner without using a drop of gasoline. This is a long article, but it confirms this. This is a history of extraterrestrials' interaction on this planet. It was written by a man by the name of Dan Willis. Dan Willis is one of the Disclosure Project's top secret military witnesses that testified at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. in 2001 in front of every major media, an event that should have changed the world but was manipulated by a controlled media. He explains the history of how a secret government operating illegally within our national security system has maintained control of the media and secrecy for over 60 years. Dan Willis served in the U.S. Navy as a high-speed code operator in the Naval Communication Station in San Francisco, as well as combat action in Vietnam. An ex-radio broadcast engineer and ABC newsman, Dan has taken a keen interest in how the media has withheld disclosure of the full message to the public, a message based on the hundreds of credible military and intelligence witness testimonies. What I'm sharing with you today reflects on this question: who controls the agreed upon reality through the mainstream media, and why they fear disclosing the truth about the extraterrestrial reality? The answer to this question, of course, you must ultimately decide. Now, I want to share this with you. I have told you in every show here on Blog Talk Radio that you need to understand that the entire national press is controlled and is simply giving you the news you are supposed to have. You need to go to the freeamerican.com and www.shopfreeamerican.com to order my books and the new Free American magazines. And this, what I'm sharing with you today, will probably fill up the entire June issue of the Free American. The Free American magazine. They don't want you to read it. They've tried to kill me. They've tried to shut me down. They've tried to destroy the businesses. My magazines were valued at $1 million, and those have been taken away from you. I had one of them sold for $500,000. Contract was signed on Thursday. Monday I walked in. Press release went out on Friday. Monday I walked into the office and the CEO was white and said, "I can't go through with it, Clay. They're threatening to impeach me from my own position. My stock's crashing like a rock. I can't do this." So this information that I'm sharing with you now is very, very timely. You need to understand it. It's long, again, it's a history, but I'm going to devote a lot of time to that today and maybe quite some time into the future. Again, I've told you on my website, up on the freeamerican.com, that this May issue is a good thing. That we're having within our grasp an oil-free culture of magnetic generators, GMO-free farms, growing hemp, and supermarket chains producing produce on their roofs, and so that you're eating organic vegetables on the day they're picked from pesticide-free soil. Imagine automobiles that gets hundreds of miles a gallon on fuel made from algae, grown and processed locally. Imagine ships crossing the ocean, their engines running on hydrogen extracted from the water they float on. The U.S. Navy's doing that now. Imagine a world without banks, debt, and war. Schools and colleges that educate instead of indoctrinate. Imagine free Americans working together, growing and producing with love instead of hate and fear. This is my vision. I can do that if I have your support. They control the money, they control the media, the Rothschilds bought the bankers, whatever Rothschilds or whatever they are. Now, are the Rothschilds Jewish? Is this a Jewish plot? Well, let's see, what else were the Rothschilds? Oh yeah, they were Germans. The Nazis were Germans. Hitler was Austrian. You know, this crosses race, this crosses religion, and they've used that. And I've told you in my fiction novels that for 10,000 years we've had the technology to fly to Mars, to build structures and bases on the moon. We've had that for 10,000 years. We were able to build pyramids. We can't build those today. How did they do that? Why do we have pyramids all over the world? Something there we're not being told. This is the same thing is true about these extraterrestrials. So what is the agreed upon reality? It is your perception of the world around you. This begins to take form from the moment of your birth and through the years, through the indoctrination of information from everything, from your school education to what you see on television. They don't call it programming for nothing. All this information helps to form your perception of the world, but have you noticed that every so often there appears to be some unexplainable glitch in that reality? As was expressed in the movie The Matrix, when Morpheus explained to Neo, let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something very wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. But we're not talking science fiction here. Many people, obviously, since there's something wrong with the world and our perceptions, have been manipulated to hide the truth surrounding the extraterrestrials. As Robert F. Kennedy said once before he was assassinated, I found out something I never knew. I found out that my world was not the real world. The major key to unlocking understanding of this hidden reality is the extraterrestrial UFO issue. No one can claim to be the absolute expert or authority on this subject, as it is surrounded in compartmentalized secrecy, and truly the most one can do is just scratch the surface to look for the indicators that have surfaced which point to a fuller picture, being careful not to elude yourself to an absolute conclusion, as the rabbit hole goes many levels deep. These indicators are glitches in the agreed-upon reality. Can many times be revealed from many leaked documents and whistleblowers that have corroborating information that indicate a reality in which the extreme efforts have been done in order to keep hidden the full truth from the public, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary. What is being presented here today are some of the indicators based on historical elements outside of what the history books have taught us in school, in which anyone can verify historically this information for themselves. Now, I've been in this when I found out about the drug dealing, about our CIA chief, George Bush, smuggling drugs into this country. They tried to stop me. They tried to shut me down. They bought companies and set them up and hired me and fired me. My father-in-law, one of my father-in-laws, knew about the UFOs because he escorted the surviving alien from Roswell to Truman's office, to the Pentagon, wherever he took him. I asked him, his name was Colonel Loy Conrad. I asked him, Loy, you want to come on my show? Want to do my show with me and let's talk about this? He said, no, I want to live. And as I began to get more popular, he said, boy, you are a popular guy. They came by my house, wanted to know why I was talking to Clay Douglas. I said, what did you tell him, Loy? He said, I told him I had to. You were my son-in-law. A few months later, he was dead. Now, Willis says if I had not my own first-hand experience regarding this subject, I would most likely not even be writing about this, as there would be no need for this question to ever enter my mind. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I feel it's clear that the deception needs to be exposed, as it is important for the future of humanity and this planet to learn the truth for many reasons and understand our ability to transform the agreed-upon reality. It's why I've told you I plan on writing science fiction from now on. And as I go through this, what I wrote as science fiction 45 years ago is closer to reality today than you would possibly imagine, than I could have imagined. And Willis tells you, and I agree with this, because this is what I've told you. Do your own research and trust no one single source, as there's much disinformation, as those who know the truth are sworn to secrecy, and then with a compartmentalized, incomplete understanding at best. Use your own observation and analysis. Look for the consistent indicators that agree with your own reasoning. I've said I hate being right so much. It's almost a curse. The indicators on a historical timeline we're about to explore, most of it can be verified by reputable authors on the subject of reference at the end of this document, and some elements can only be alleged to have happened due to our lack of official supporting evidence surrounding such events. But these are included only as a possible corroborating indicators of the larger picture. Later on, I'll inject my own first-hand experiences and observations that appear to be consistent with the other indications of an agenda dictated by unwarranted influences that have infiltrated and are affecting all our lives, whether we are conscious of it or not. Our human history has been filled with those who feel they are entitled to rule and dictate over and enslave others by imposing their will, not respecting each being's equality and the right of choice and free will that harms no one. Where the golden rule is interpreted instead to mean whoever has the gold makes the rules, making survival of the many based on a monetary system where the good of all humanity can be corrupted with financial power and the influence by the few. As expressed by Mayer Amschel Bauer Rothschild. Yeah, he was Jewish. He was also German. Give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes its laws. This is the fundamental of how the laws governing the planet, people of this planet, are influenced and be corrupted by the wealthy elite who feel entitled to be the people's rulers. Enslavement of humanity over gold has ancient roots that go back 450,000 years ago, according to secret Sumerian clay tablets that tell the story of the gods who came to earth and ruled over them. This is exactly what I wrote in my books. Before I had this knowledge, before I had this information, before I had 45 years of research on this subject, I wrote a book about it. And frankly, I don't know whether I've just got a vivid imagination or a great memory that goes back thousands of years. They were called the Anunnaki, which is translated to mean those who from heaven to earth came. I wrote a short story about that called The Future Past, about flying around in one of these spaceships, and there were, in my story, there were half a dozen of them. The Olympus, the Asgard, and of course, the theme of my character, who was the co-captain of the Earth ship Heaven. Fiction, yes, but as I go back and read and edit, and based on the information I'm sharing with you right now, it's pretty incredible. And even the vision I had of the future 45 years ago, when and what's happening now confirms what I told you 45 years ago when I helped my friend Jack Hara write his book, so that he had an income so he could write his book, Emperor Wears No Clothes. He said, hemp can save the planet. Cannabis can save the planet. He was right. And that's why it's been kept from you. They don't want you to be independent. They don't want you to have the source of income. And they've done the same thing over the UFO. So all of this blends together. All of this runs together. My vivid imagination, my patriotic bent starting the militias, trying to tell you the truth about the drug smuggling. And I've told you, oh, Clay, that's not marijuana. That's it marijuana. You've been programmed for this. Marijuana, that leads to harder drugs, doesn't it? Yeah, so does Coca-Cola. Yeah, so does beer. Yeah, so does wine. And marijuana certainly does if you got to go to a drug dealer to buy it. If you can go to your neighbor and get a little bit from him that he pulls off a plant in his backyard, you don't need a drug dealer. Enslavement of humanity over God. Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. They had gold mining operations on earth, and these gods, not wanting to do our hard work themselves, revolted. A conflicted decision was made to genetically create a worker race using a modified form of their DNA combined with that of existing primates that have evolved here on earth, thus creating a new, made in their image, modified species that was intelligent enough to do the work they needed, but limited with a decreased lifespan and an intelligence level. The DNA was manipulated, so you don't know the power you got. You don't know how to use it. And there's a few of us that have transcended all this and do use a little bit more of our mind than those of you that have been programmed. And if you were raised watching television, you damn sure been programmed. The gods were pleased with the result because the new workers never revolted. They were fed and given shelter and didn't mind hard labor and didn't complain. The reason for this of course, was that this new species didn't know better. This was actually all they knew in their life as their life of being slaves. The Anunnaki mated with some of the females of this new species and created a hybrid bloodlines in the human race. Some of this ancient knowledge was passed down to a few initiates into the mystery schools and secret societies around the world. Indications appear to show that a bloodline of wealthy ruling class tied to secret societies into the secret societies throughout the centuries has dominated the ruling families and the wealthy world banking elite, whose outlook and ideologies of elitism, racism, eugenics, enslavement, false flag operations, and psychological warfare for world domination are shared with a similar ideology of the Nazis in pursuit of a one-world fascist totalitarian government. In fact, this banking cabal was the ones who had originally funded the Nazis into existence, funded the communists into existence. They before the end of the war, it was revealed the Nazis had a fallback plan to infiltrate into the United States via the same group that funded the Nazi operations originally. Their approach was to have a very long-range plan over time using psychological warfare to completely dominate the full spectrum of information of the American public in all forms of media and education in order to manipulate the populace's perception of their agreed-upon reality and thus influence their interpretation and decision-making abilities in order to effectively hide their secret compartmentalized operations of a hidden breakaway civilization as they would slowly advance their agenda for world domination. The Nazis called their plan worldview warfare. Well, good morning there, Dr. D. Charge. Good morning, Max. Toga. Welcome. And Milwaukee Vibrator. All right, I like that. To better understand and find what indications there might be to reveal a pattern for the basis of this hypothesis, let's go back through history and look at the sequence of events started at the beginning of the 20th century in an attempt to better answer the question of who is behind controlling the perceptions of the agreed-upon reality through the mainstream media and why they fear disclosing the truth about extraterrestrial reality. In 1900, the first radio signals received on Earth by Tesla to be from extraterrestrials. Nikola Tesla, while working on his magnifying transmitter, received a series of signals, what he called counting codes. This was in fact the first cosmic radio signal ever detected. He believed it was either from Venus or Mars and that he was the first to receive a message from an extraterrestrial civilization. Tesla wrote the following enthusiastic letter about the potential contact to the American Red Cross in New York City. The retrospect is glorious, the prospect inspiring. Much might be said of both, but one idea dominates my mind. This, my best, my dearest, is for your noble cause. I have observed electrical actions which have appeared inexplicable. Faint and uncertain though they were, they have given me a deep conviction and a foreknowledge that ere long all human beings on this globe as one will turn their eyes to the firmament above with feelings of love and reverence thrilled by the glad news. Brethren, we have a message from another world, remote, unknown. It reads, 1, 2, 3. In 1901, President Theodore Roosevelt got into office. And by 1905, the banking elite of J.P. Morgan suppresses the release of Tesla's free energy to the world. The moment J.P. Morgan, who was Nikola Tesla's financier, learned the project he was funding for Nikola Tesla would also bring free electricity into the world, which Morgan couldn't meter or control, he pulled the funding and had all of Tesla's work dismantled. And Tesla, the man responsible for originally inventing wireless communications and the electrical power grid, both of which we use every day, became obscure in history books. Giving the credit instead to Thomas Edison and Marconi, Tesla was left penniless for his unselfish motivations to humanity, so that J.P. Morgan could maintain his profitable control. There is an insight of the priorities of the banking elite as to whether they or not they would release free energy for the entire world against their existing vested energy programs. Flash forward to 1913, President Woodrow Wilson and international global bankers set up a loan plan through the Federal Reserve to put the United States into an ongoing interest-bearing debt. Federal Reserve Act, written in part by Paul Warburg, whose brother Max Warburg worked with I.G. Farben in Germany, who funded Hitler. U.S. now begins its collection of interest debt through the IRS to the international global bankers using the Federal Reserve notes, amassing trillions of dollars of debt to the American people. A number of people had something to say about this situation. Abraham Lincoln, for instance, said the government should create, issue, and circulate all the currency and credits needed to satisfy the spending power of the government and the buying power of the consumers. By the adoption of these principles, the taxpayers will be saved immense sums of interest. Money will cease to be master and become the servant of humanity. Again, Lincoln not necessarily a good guy. He got put in the middle of the Civil War, and this was a bankers' war. They fomented the Civil War. Sir Hosea Stamp, the director of the Bank of England in 1940, said bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them with the power to create credit, and with a flick of the pen, they will create enough money to buy it back again. If you want to be the slaves of bankers and pay the cost of your own slavery, then let the bankers control money and control credit. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their money, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and the corporations which grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on their continent their fathers conquered. I believe that the banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. The ruling power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. That was Thomas Jefferson. And I've told you that quote probably every week at least when I do this show. I am in good company here, from presidents, from Thomas Jefferson, even George Washington. They knew, they understand, I know and I understand, and I've tried to share this with you. If I ask you for a donation, if I ask you for a little bit of help, I'm not asking for any more than a politician that you put into office that works for the bankers. I've been in the political race. I've been in the presidential race. That is not the answer. Only as individuals working together can we offset this. And I am supplying you with the Free American, with this radio show. I am supplying you with the truth, with the knowledge, and let me tell you, there are people out there with a little bit more money, with a little bit more pull, a little bit more connections, that are trying to get you to spend your money to go to Washington, D.C. What they're doing there in the Operation American Spring starting tomorrow will do nothing. Will do nothing. They are picking on just a few people, Obama being one of them. Now, there is a process going on to take Obama out. I agree with one of their goals, but they're doing it for the wrong reasons. They're doing it because Obama is threatening Israel. Israel was created by the bankers, by the Rothschilds, as a colony, safe country, if you will, armed with nuclear weapons. And again, it's not about Jews. It's not even just about Germans. Some of the people are Jewish. Some of the bankers are Jewish. Some of the people who are bankers were Germans. So a lot of them are involved in England. There's 3 cities that they use to run us. The Vatican, the City of London. The Queen has to ask permission to enter the City of London. And Washington, D.C. In 1970, the banking cabals purchased the main newspapers to control the perception of information to the public. The start of the mainstream media control was initiated when J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, and Warburg, the same person who helped create the Federal Reserve in 1913, purchased the main 25 newspapers of the country and dictated how the information was released under their guidelines and policies to control the perception of information to the public. These policies were later controlled and formed by the Council on Foreign Relations. 1919, mediumship delivers technology of circular flying machine plans to the Nazis. Technology instructions for the creation of a circular flying machine was being received by Maria Orsic, a gifted medium who was the leader of the Veteran, a team of psychic girls serving the Vril shaft. A meeting was held at an old hunting lodge near Berchtesgaden, Germany, where Maria Orsic presented to a small group assembled from the Thule, Vril, and Black Sun Society telepathic messages she claimed to have received from extraterrestrial civilizations existing in the distant Aldebaran solar system, 68 light years away in the constellation of Taurus. The information concerned the construction of an unusual flying vehicle which could alter the flow of time around it. Upon studying these otherworldly designs, Dr. W.O. Schulman and his associates from the University of Munich and the Thule Society realized the channeling actually contained viable physics, and over the ensuing years, construction was initiated. By 1922, development of the working prototype, a redesigned 5-meter RFZ-2, was successfully test-flown in 1934, and eventually flying disc development was taken over by Division SSE-4 of Hitler's Third Reich. If true, this may have given the Nazis an undisclosed advanced technological edge. Subsequent levitation craft advances between 1941 and 1944 spawned the Hornblow series, the heavy hitters of the Reich's saucer fleet, driven by powerful tachyon magnetic gravitic engines called Thule tachyometers, speculated to be the large spherical containers of mercury spinning around on a vertical axis. These armored saucer ships of various sizes came equipped with armaments such as Panzer tank cannon bursts mounted to the undersides, as well as Klystron laser cannons. The Haber of the Reichs saucer fleet. We've got photographs on them. They're unable to be authenticated, but the following statement from Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens is a valid testimony. He said the Germans had 9 research enterprises developing and testing flying saucers. Investigations revealed that 8 of these factories, along with scientists and key figures, were successfully evacuated from Germany. The 9th was destroyed. U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens stated that we had classified information that came from the research enterprises that were transported to Antarctica, to the place called New Swabia. At least one disc research company was transported to that location. Another went to the Amazon, and a third to the north coast of Norway. They were evacuated to secret underground facilities. Apparently, the combining scientific research of Germany's brilliant scientists with the analysis of ancient knowledge, mediumship information, and reverse engineering of a crashed ET vehicle in 1936 brought about incredible results. 1920, the Tavistock Institute became the Center for the Study of Human Behavior, Control, Propaganda, and Social Manipulation. In 1920, the Tavistock Institute had its beginnings, later became the Center for the Study of Human Behavior, Mind Control, Propaganda, Social Manipulation. Created in London, it spread overseas with the financial help of the Rockefeller Foundation. Its influence increased when it combined the study of anthropology, economy, organizations, politics, psychology, psychoanalysis, psychiatry, and sociology. In secret, Tavistock guides powerful multinationals such as the Rand Corporation. After 60 years of research, one of Tavistock's main discoveries concerns child sexuality. This has a great influence on the development of personality. Early sex stimulation, they found, produces adults whose emotional development is similar to that of a neurotic child. Their second discovery is related to fear and stress. Tavistock researchers found out that people under controlled stress become more infantile and give up strongly held beliefs under group pressure to conform to popular opinion. This may explain why the mainstream media, there is so much violence, sex, and fear-inducing messages. This turns people into scared, submissive children who try to evade stress of daily life through emotional sublimation of television, radio, movies, and even video games. It is known that humans are impressionable and mimic what they see. Does it really seem normal that so much of the images being broadcast through television and movies into the subconscious of millions of minds, showing humans killing and hurting other humans, that are delivered through the vast assortment of crime dramas and violent movies? In soap dramas having to do with relationships, deception is a common theme. Are we being programmed that this is the new normal? What have I told you? They don't call it programming for nothing. You can see in the news copycat crimes and other situations of extreme violence that have been occurring with greater frequency in the news. In China, they have created an entire industry of removing the violence out of movies that come from the U.S., as they believe they have an unhealthy effect on their society. In 1921, the Council on Foreign Relations was formed. The New York branch was dominated by the associates of J.P. Morgan, and among the members of the Council of Foreign Relations is Allen Dulles. One of the Council on Foreign Relations is one of the roundtable groups of the wealthy elite between Europe and the United States. We've got that roundtable consists of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the United Nations, the Bilderberg Group, the Club of Rome, and the Royal Institute of International Affairs. Alan Dulles was historically instrumental in furthering the fascist agenda and the Nazi infiltration after the war into America. He was involved from the very beginning with Hitler's first meeting that raised him to power in 1933. As an attorney for the Schroeder Bank, which financed Hitler, he made arrangements to allow Nazi spies into the CIA, falsified reports to President Truman to expand the infiltration operations. Later, he was fired as the CIA director by JFK for his hidden subversive activities. In 1963, after JFK's murder, he was then assigned by LBJ to head the Warren Commission, which determined that no conspiracy was involved in the murder of JFK in his report to the public. The implications of the Rockefeller, Allen Dulles, BIS military intelligence organization intact after the war, still under Garland's operational command within our CIA. In 1928, the Wall Street crash, corruption and insider trading between the banks and the brokers. In 1933, January 4th, Hitler comes to power, appointed Chancellor of Germany. On hand were prominent industrialists, at least one director of the giant douche bank, as well as I.G. Farben's Hermann Schmitz and Dr. George Schnitzler, representing Farben's board of directors. According to Arthur Eustace Mullins, who happened to be a friend of mine, I knew him personally, was also attending this meeting were John Dulles and Alan Dulles of the New York law firm Sullivan and Cromwell, which represented the Schroeder Bank. In February 27th of 1933, there's a Nazi false flag operation. Hitler, in order to justify war, does a false flag operation on the Reichstag building. They successfully blamed the fire on the communists and claimed it marked the beginning of widespread terrorism and unrest, threatening the safety of the German homeland. Does that sound a little familiar to you? History repeats itself, especially for those who do not learn from history. After the fire, Hitler invoked the German Enabling Act, similar to the U.S. Patriot Act, which permitted the suspension of civil liberties during national emergencies. Some examples of this decree of the Reichspräsident: for the protection of the people and the state, abrogating the following constitutional protections: freedom of the press, free expression of opinion, individual property rights, right of assembly and association, right of privacy, of postal and electronic communication, states' rights of self-government, and protection against unlawful searches and seizures. Reichsmarshal Hermann Wilhelm Göring, the Nazi founder of the Gestapo and head of the Luftwaffe, said the following at the Nuremberg trials after the war: "Why, of course the people don't want war. Why should some poor slob on a farm want to risk his life in a war when the best he can get out of it is not to come back to his farm in one piece? Naturally, the common people don't want war, neither in Russia nor in England, nor for that matter in Germany, but that is understood. But after all, it is the leaders of a country who determine the policy, and it's always a simple matter to drag the people along, whether it is a democracy, a fascist dictatorship, or a parliament, or a communist dictatorship. Voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to do the bidding of the leaders. This is easy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked and denounce the peacemakers for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in any country. Go to March 4th, 1933. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who sold you out and sold you into slavery and made you collateral for the bankers, also said, the real truth of the matter, as you and I know, there's a financial element of the large centers that has owned the government of the United States since the days of Andrew Jackson. That was a letter he wrote on November 21st, 1933 to Colonel E. Mandel House. Now, the same year, Hitler came into power. The Wall Street banking fascist Prescott Bush, father of George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, J.P. Morgan Rockefeller, organized a U.S. government coup to create a fascist government along with death camps in the U.S. to rid of undesirables, using U.S. Marine Corps General Smedley Butler and 500,000 veterans under him to do it. But Smedley Butler became a whistleblower. If it wasn't for him, we would have lost our Constitution and Bill of Rights and been under a complete fascist dictatorship in 1933. General Butler successfully infiltrated the plot and blew the whistle. This hero of America later published a book in 1935 where he wrote, "War's a racket, always has been. It is possible, the oldest, easily the most profitable, and surely the most vicious. It is the only one international in scope. It is the only one in which profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. A racket is best described, I believe, as something that is not what it seems to the majority of the people. Only a small inside group of people know what it is about. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the very many. Out of war, a few people make huge fortunes." It's important to note that the American and German factions of this empire of money, such as Schroeder in Germany and Rockefellers and J.P. Morgan in America, existed before the war. What was due during and after the war was the injection of Nazism as yet another contending faction within it, with all its ideological and covert operations commitments. It is therefore crucial to one's understanding of this breakaway civilization to have an understanding of the pre-war structure of these arrangements. 1936, the banks that funded the Nazis. As the war approached, the links between the Rockefellers and the Nazi government became more and more firm. In 1936, the J. Henry Schroeder Bank of New York entered into a partnership with the Rockefellers. Schroeder, Rockefeller and Company Investment Bankers was formed as a part of an overall company that Time magazine disclosed as being the economic booster of the Rome-Berlin axis. The partners in Schroeder, Rockefeller and Company included Avery Rockefeller, nephew of John D., Baron Bruno von Schroeder in London, and Kurt von Schroeder of the Bank of International Settlements, and the Gestapo in Cologne. Avery Rockefeller owned 42% of Schroeder, Rockefeller, and Baron Bruno and his Nazi cousin 47%. Their lawyers were John Dulles and Alan Dulles of Sullivan and Cromwell. They were very instrumental to the agenda. 1936, the Nazis reverse engineer the extraterrestrial vehicle that crashed into the Black Forest of Germany. A German writer, John von Helsing, described the discovery of the crash saucer in the Black Forest near Freiburg in 1936 and says this technology was taken, reverse engineered, and combined with the information the Vril Society had received through the channeling, and was made into a further project called a Hanabu. It is claimed that the original treaty with the Greys was established by the Bavarian Thule and the Illuminati Society as early as 1933 that shared technology with the Nazis. Another treaty with the Greys will be made much later in 1954 by the Eisenhower administration. If true, this would give the Nazis a 21-year lead in extraterrestrial technology transfer program. Ancient maps may have been reveal Antarctica may have been the continent of Atlantis before a pole shift. The Piri Reis map of Antarctica dates back to 1513, which experts concluded was the ancient maps of Antarctica were more precise than 20th century maps 300 years later. It brought hope of the Nazi search for what they believed was their Aryan heritage of Atlantis. One hypothesis states that Antarctica is the former Atlantis, buried under the ice as a result of the earlier pole shift. Once the Nazis discovered these ancient maps, they realized occult secret knowledge could be stored on the continent that was once Atlantis. Over 230 square miles of the frozen continent were mapped from the air, and Germans discovered vast regions that were surprisingly free of ice, as well as warm water, lakes, and cave inlets. One vast ice cave within the glacier was reportedly found to extend 30 miles to a large hot water geothermal lake below. Various scientific teams were moved to the area, including hunters, trappers, collectors, zoologists, botanists, agriculturists, plant specialists, mycologists, parasitologists, and marine biologists, ornithologists, and many others. Numerous divisions of the German government were involved with the top-secret project. After the data was gathered, deep underground construction teams came pouring into the renamed New Schwabenland. They came on cargo ships, military transport ships, and submarines. The cargo ships came from South Africa, were protected by host killer submarines and military ships. In 1938, Rockefeller Foundation funds a psychological study of public fear reaction to a fake radio broadcast announcing an alien invasion. War of the Worlds is radio broadcast by Orson Welles, who was funded indirectly by the Rockefeller Foundation to the Princeton Radio Project and guided every step at every stage by the Council on Foreign Relations and psychologist Dr. Paul F. Lazarsfeld. Frank Stanton, who later became head of CBS Radio and Television, and Dr. Hadley Cantrell hired Orson Welles to adapt the H.G. Wells classic science fiction book into a radio drama format in order to study the behavior of citizens. Orson Welles apologized and said it was only meant to be as a Halloween prank, but it was crafted to create terror and analyze the reaction. Allegedly, Orson Welles received death threats from the Rockefellers should he ever reveal that the unforeseen reaction to this broadcast is precisely what the perpetrators had hoped to achieve and analyzed demographically, psychologically, and statistically. It was the first mainstream media psychological operation heard by 6 million people. 1,700,000 believed the broadcast to be genuine. 1,200 were frightened enough to take action either by running away or preparing to fight the alien invaders. Dr. Hadley Cantrell actually wrote a paper titled Invasion from Mars, a study in the psychology of panic, examining the power of a radio broadcast media and its effect on the population under the direct influence of fear. The Invasion from Mars by Hadley Cantrell. And in 1938, Roosevelt and Churchill sent General Donovan to Tavistock Institute for PSYOPs indoctrination before the setting up of OSS. In 1938, Roosevelt executed a secret agreement with Churchill, which in effect ceded U.S. sovereignty to England, because it agreed to let Special Operations Executive control U.S. policies. To implement this agreement, Roosevelt sent General Donovan to London for indoctrination before setting up the OSS, now the CIA, under the aegis of SOE-SIS. The entire OSS program, as well as the CIA, has always worked on guidelines set up by the Tavistock Institute. Tavistock Institute originated a mass civilian bombing raids carried out by Roosevelt and Churchill purely as a clinical experiment in mass terror, keeping records of the results as they watched the guinea pigs reacting under controlled laboratory conditions. All Tavistock and American Foundation techniques have a single goal: to break down the psychological strength of the individual and render him helpless to oppose the dictators of the world order. Any technique which helps to break down family unit, family inculcated principles of religion, honor, patriotism, and sexual behavior is used by the Tavistock scientists as weapons of crowd control. These methods of Freudian psychotherapy induce permanent mental illness in those who undergo this treatment by destabilizing their character. The victim is then advised to establish new rituals of personal interaction, that is, to indulge in brief sexual encounters which actually set the participants adrift with no stable personal relationship in their lives, destroying their ability to establish or maintain a family. Tavistock Institute has developed such power in the U.S. no one achieves prominence in any field unless he's been trained in behavioral science at Tavistock or one of its subsidiaries.
Discover what's really going on in the world that mainstream media won't tell you. At Truth Radio, you can listen live or listen to a large selection of archived programs. TruthRadio.com. The truth is out there. Did you ever get the feeling? Are you staring at the ceiling? He took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. And the present takes it till they find us in a grave somewhere. By some, he's been called controversial. But we never seem to get too far. Well, if you think you're being taken, then you're ready to awaken to the truth of what we really are. Now, keep in mind that some of my guests have been approached by Homeland Security or FBI saying, why are you going on the Clay Douglas show? My message to those guys, if they're listening this morning, is go get a cup of coffee. Maybe you'll learn something. We both took the same oath, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I don't recall there being an expiration date on that. And as long as we stay passive, we'll succumb. He is the free American, Clay Douglas. Well, the naked truth and fact is, we'll have to pay our taxes, and that is why the banksters keep us down. Catch the Free American weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern. Learning public school and did our fathers all the history of fighting back our liberty so we could play the tyrant fool. For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-999-8621. Then turn to the slave. Overburdened and bewildered.
One more for you. I wrote this.
Like the sky, spirit standing by the ocean, everything like the rivers of your motion, giving all your mighty glory, vanished from the sky. Just another story. It's not a life.
God.
All right. No, Laura Eisenhower isn't my guest. I don't have a guest. This is my show. I'm featuring a series of stories by a gentleman who was in the Army called Mr. Willis. Today, the Tavistock Institute operates a $6 billion a year network of foundations in the U.S., all of it funded by U.S. taxpayer money. 10 major institutions are under its direct control, with 400 subscribers, 3,000 other study groups and think tanks, which originate many types of programs to increase the control of the world order of the American people. The Stanford Research Center, adjoining the Hoover Institution, is a $150 million a year operation with 3,300 employees. It carries on program surveillance for Bechtel, Kaiser, and 400 other companies, and extensive intelligence operations for the CIA. It's the largest institution on the West Coast, promoting mind control and the behavioral science. One of the key agencies is a conduct for secret instructions from Tavistock is the Ditchley Foundation, founded in 1957. The American branch of the Ditchley Foundation is run by Cyrus Vance, former Secretary of State and Director of the Rockefeller Foundation, and William Lord, President of the Council on Foreign Relations at the time this was written. 1939, September 1st. World War II begins with the Nazi invasion of Poland by Germany. 1940, the Rockefeller Foundation studies the effectiveness of propaganda. The Rockefeller Foundation, funded at Princeton, Dr. Hadley Cantrell Office of Public Opinion Research, studied the effectiveness of propaganda produced by the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services. Also paid by the Rockefeller Foundation, Edward R. Murrah, a member of CFR, to monitor Nazi radio propaganda and judge its effectiveness. From this project stemmed the Foreign Broadcast Intelligence Service, which eventually became the United States Information Agency, used by the National Security Council as its chief disseminator of propaganda after World War II. After leaving CBS, Frank Stanton became chairman of the RAND Corporation, a government think tank which researched, among other topics, mass brainwashing of unsuspecting public through the mainstream media. Joseph Goebbels, head of Germany's Ministry of Propaganda, Public Enlightenment, and Propaganda. Hitler understood propaganda intuitively. He wrote in Mein Kampf, one started out with a very correct assumption that in the size of the lie there is always contained a certain factor of credibility, since the great masses of the people may fall victim to the great lie rather than the small one, since they themselves would also sometimes lie in little things, but it would certainly be too ashamed to tell a great lie. Thus, it would not enter their heads to tell a great lie, and they would not believe the others could tell such an infamous lie. Indeed, they will doubt and hesitate. Even after learning the truth, they will continue to think there must be some other explanation. Therefore, for just this reason, some part of the most impudent lie will remain a stick of fact, which all the great lying artists and societies of the world know only too well, and therefore villainously employ. The example of the great lie by the Hitler propaganda was the false flag operation on the Reichstag building to justify war and restrict the people's freedoms. The German people didn't question the false flag event because Hitler pointed out the great lie had a certain factor of credibility, so they could not believe that someone would tell such an infamous lie. And aren't we... Excuse me. This is exactly what we say happened with the World Trade Center. Oh, the planes brought down the building. Never happened in history before. Buildings were built to withstand that. It was the great lie, and it took us into war, and it limited your freedoms. It rolled FEMA into the Department of Homeland Security, and FEMA is nothing more than the Gestapo. In 1941, the OSS, using full spectrum dominance of the public's perception and the application of fear and terror for war, Military Intelligence Director General William Wild Bill Donovan sanctioned developments of an Americanized version of Nazi propaganda, or Nazi psychological warfare propaganda techniques, which was defined as full spectrum dominance over all aspects of the target population's interpretive and decision-making faculties by employing all of the techniques of mass communication propaganda, the all-important component, the calculated application of terror. This program was used on the United States population and continues to this day. Television in every home is now a primary tool for psychological warfare. After the war, for perhaps the greatest Nazi wonder weapon of all, the invention of television, which was showcased at the 1936 Berlin Olympics, became the primary propaganda tool in every living room in America for domination over the worldview of perception of our entire society. Truly, a weapon of mass deception and the venue for the exploitation of a new scientific technique of opinion molding called engineering of consent. The mind control program had been perfected by Edward Bernays' nephew, Edward Bernays, nephew to the famed psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud. During World War I, Bernays had adapted it from the German propaganda techniques. Due to the negative implications surrounding the word propaganda, because it was used by the Germans, he promoted the term public relations, a mind control technique to create news in order to appeal to the instincts and fundamental emotions of the public. Bernays declared, "We are governed, our minds are molded, our taste forms our idea, suggested largely by men we've never heard of. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind." 1943, indications that a remote secret Nazi base has been completed for Hitler. Grand Admiral Karl Dunnig, commander of the Nazi U-boat, stated that at the other end of the world we made an impregnable citadel for our Fuhrer. Indications are that the Nazis were building a secret base called Base 211 in Antarctica within 1938-1943. The plan for psychological warfare in the United States from a Nazi underground network after the war. That's in July 27th, 1943. The German Foreign Office expert on the U.S., the geopolitician Colin Ross, suggested a 15-page memorandum, a plan for ideological campaign in the United States, Recognizing Germany's inability to bring the war to a victorious end, Ross proposed the immediate implementation of carefully planned psychological warfare to undermine the anticipated U.S. military victory. Ross regarded the American public opinion as the weakest link because the American people seemed especially susceptible to scare propaganda, hinting that a defeated Germany would join the ranks of Bolshevism. The memorandum, which was addressed to the German Secretary of State in the Foreign Office, von Steinglatz, became the guidepost of Germany's highly successful blackmail diplomacy in post-war America. There are some significant parts of that memorandum. The prerequisites for psychological warfare: analyze the spiritual temper of world public opinion, evaluate correctly ideological weapons available, right before the eyes of the world a strategic concept which will impress not only our own people but also the neutrals and our enemies, select the most effective tactical methods for the accomplishment of the above, coordinate the ideological campaign in support of our military and economic warfare. The more prospects for outright military victory diminish, the more urgent becomes the necessity for all-out psychological warfare. Therefore, it is necessary to set up a far-flung organization in every country which, under enemy occupation, must carry on the task from the underground. Now, February 22nd, 1944, President Roosevelt was aware of the ET UFO project. He wrote a double top-secret memo on White House stationery for the Special Committee on Non-Terrestrial Science and Technology. Both the title and content clearly allude to extraterrestrial life, the former using the word non-terrestrial and the latter talks about coming to grips with the reality that our planet is not the only one harboring intelligent life in the universe. Himmler set out expeditions around the world for ancient relics and manuscripts from Tibet to South America. Notably, they hunted for Knights Templars archives which contained indications they visited America long before Columbus. Apparently, the Templars owned secret manuscripts similar to the Piri-Reis map. It suggests they knew something about Antarctica and the occupied territories. SS Special Commando units removed archives and libraries and confiscated libraries of theological faculties and various secret societies, generating a huge library of occult knowledge. It is possible that the Antarctica Division of the Nazis learned something incredible about Antarctica. They made the study of this continent one of the main Nazi leadership goals. The SS were after very specific knowledge that the Grail Cup, together with the Holy Spear, opens the way to world domination. Hitler was aware of this legend before World War I and possessed the spear in 1938. In order to rule the world, he needed the Grail Cup. The spear represents the active male principle and the world's scientific knowledge, combined with the cup, the symbol of active female principle, and the symbol of wisdom. Thus, it was the dominant idea which preoccupied the Third Reich's elite. And the objective to enslave the world utilizing occult knowledge and technology, rejecting the moral code aspect of its use. They explored occult science, religious and mystical practices, and people's paranormal abilities. They sought to connect and contact extraterrestrials and study ancient civilizations for superior technological knowledge. Again, that's what I've told you. And the fact that we've had this knowledge of flying ship Vimanas for thousands of years. Maybe even more, maybe hundreds of thousands. Nazi Commando SS Colonel Otto Skorzeny was given orders by Reichsfuhrer Heinrich Himmler to recover the fabled treasure of King Solomon. which was believed to contain the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail from the Montségur in southern France, based on the Holy Grail research work done by Otto Rahn. The Montségur Castle sits atop a mountain peak, approachable only on three sides, with a sheer drop of several thousand feet on the other. Scorzini concentrated on the impossible purpose of the rock after abseiling down the vertical rock face. He searched for and found evidence of ancient tracks leading away from the foot of the mountain. By following these, he eventually discovered a walled-up cave, which once broken open allegedly revealed the treasure, according to Colonel Howard Buchner. Scorzini then sent a message to Himmler's headquarters in Berlin: "I have found it." The swift reply followed: "Well done, congratulations. Watch the sky tomorrow at noon. Await our arrival." On March 16th, 1944, the Nazis accessed the greatest caches of rich known to humankind. The treasure's fascinating history can be traced back to ancient Mesopotamia. Enormous amounts of priceless riches in the form of gold, silver, many other precious gems, priceless artifacts comprise this treasure, but Solomon's treasure also contained riches of quite a different sort. It included ancient scrolls, texts, tablets, upon which were inscribed some of the world's most esoteric and occult knowledge. The knowledge had been handed down for thousands of years, from the time of the world's first recorded civilization in ancient Sumer. It was this ancient wisdom, taken from Egypt at the time of the Great Exodus, which formed the core of the Kabbalistic knowledge handed down through centuries via several secret societies. Himmler made exhaustive efforts around the world to seek out and harness occult, meaning hidden, not magic, knowledge and power for the Nazi war effort. At Welsesburg Castle, Himmler led elite SS members on numerous sessions or spiritual exercises which involved meditation and extensive visualization to create personal and group reality. Besides the great material wealth the Nazis were able to obtain from that treasure, the recorded information on the tablets and scrolls may have been the true holy grail of ancient wisdom and knowledge of our true origins and the deepest understanding of who we are and the workings of the universe. The occult knowledge that has been guarded for centuries is now in the hands of the Nazis to be used in whatever manner necessary to further their agenda. According to Colonel Buchner, records show that some of the treasure was dispatched to the Antarctic, the Nazis' Neo-Schwabenland, and other parts of South America, while some was buried deep beneath the Wesselburg Castle in Bavaria. The massive amount of wealth provided the means to infiltrate and buy out numerous companies and corporations, both inside the United States and outside. U.S. Colonel Otto Skorzeny is said to have come into the knowledge of the new wonder weapon as a result had been possessed by the idea of special warfare, and regarding the use of this weapon to such an extent he considered it the only sure way to eventually win the war. Could it be that Skorzeny claimed to be the special warfare which will eventually win the war would be, beside the implied infiltration of the United States, using psychological warfare in the world in the art of world view warfare, which the Nazis understood so well, could have been possibly augmented through the understanding of the ancient occult knowledge that has been guarded and hidden since antiquity, that may have been derived from the ancient mystery school teachings of Egypt during the time of Akhenaten, a being who believed to be an extraterrestrial, judging by the oversized, elongated cranium. In other words, science today is the leading edges of quantum mechanics, is only starting to understand the interface of consciousness and matter which we perceive as reality. No doubt ancient civilizations have demonstrated far greater advances that we cannot duplicate in our current modern world, which is at best only beginning to understand. The Nazis were known for their resourcefulness in science. You can imagine that the knowledge derived from these ancient texts could have afforded them a literal quantum leap in understanding of the matrix of creation we live in. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. To understand the true nature of the universe, one must think of it in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Nikola Tesla told you that, and I've told you that love is your level of vibrational energy. The secret societies, which include organizations such as the Masonic and Rosicrucian Order, both of which claim their teachings to have origins from the ancient Egyptian military school during the time of Akhenaten. It is interesting to note that U.S. presidents, world leaders, and others highly influential positions in the world belong to the Masonic Order. In fact, it is said that only 2 U.S. presidents, Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy, were not either Masons or elite members of the affiliated bodies. On a personal note, my grandfather and his father, both doctors who graduated from Yale, were the highest 33rd and 32nd degrees in the Masonic Order. Again, this is Colonel Willis that is saying this. He also said, I unfortunately know little of my grandfather. He died early in Argentina. I can say I personally studied over 9 years with the Rosicrucian Order, which has a deep understanding based on these ancient teachings related to consciousness, anything that is not normally taught in public schools. Personally, I have not witnessed anything but benevolent teaching and principle and philosophy in the Rosicrucian Order, but it is believed by some that this cabal control group associated with the Nazi factor works to enlist those from the highest levels within the secret society, such as the Yale Skull and Bones Society, of which 3 generations of the Bush Camp family, including the beginning with Prescott Bush, George Bush, and George W. Bush, were all members. The connection with this cabal control group, of course, cannot be verified, since what secret societies do remains secret. We do know that President Kennedy warned us about the dangers of secret society and of secrecy itself, saying the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. Let's check here. Lost Truth Radio there for a minute. We can get it back. Alright, lost Truth Radio for a second. Now we got it back. Good, I heard something. How are we doing over in the chat room? I'm reading a manifesto off of my Facebook page. You can go there, Captain Stealth. Go to my Facebook, and it's right at the top. I believe it will be right at the top. Now you got to scroll down. Who controls the agreed upon reality through the media, and why they fear disclosing? I'll give it to you right here. If you scroll down to the bottom, you can find the beginnings of that. Talking about Skull and Bones, The connection with this cabal control group, of course, cannot be verified. Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Bavarian Illuminati, said, "The great strength of our order lies in its concealment. Let it never appear in any place in its own name, but always covered under another name, another occupation. None is better than the lower 3 degrees of Freemasonry. The public is accustomed to it, expects little from it, then therefore it takes no little notice of it. Next to this, the form of a learned or literary society is best suited to our purpose, and had Freemasonry not existed, this cover would have been employed. It may be much more than a cover. It may be a powerful engine in our hands. By establishing reading societies, subscription libraries, and taking these under our direction, and supplying them through our labors, we may turn the public mind to what we will." In 1944, the Nazis pulled out all financial resources and set up hundreds of corporations and operate from the underground. Code name Acton Alderflug, Operation Eagle Flight, resulted in the massive flight of a huge amount of gold, money, stocks, bonds, patents, copyrights, even technical specialists from Germany, along with the Central Douche Bank and the chemical cartel IG Farben, one of the largest industrial organizations in Europe. Bormann succeeded in establishing 750 front companies in Portugal, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Turkey, and Argentina. Of course, Bormann would have been unable to achieve this without substantial help from both within and without Germany, outside Germany. This came in the form of the connections of banks and businesses dating back to before the war, indeed to the financing of the Nazi Party itself following the elections of 1933. The plan for a post-war operational underground extraterrestrial state a meeting held in August 1994 at the behest of the Nazi Party. Martin Bormann at the Rotz House Hotel in Strasbourg, there the Nazis and corporate leadership of Germany schemed the final stages of the strategic evacuation plan of the Nazi Party, its post-war survival in a kind of underground extraterritorial state. In the Bormann files, we find that Rockefeller Banking Corporation protects and hides the Nazis. It's apparent that official agencies of the U.S. government are committing resources to discover the whereabouts of the infamous Nazi Party Reichsleiter, yet clearly its existence is known to private American banking interests connected with the Rockefeller interest. In other words, those interests are acting counter to the goals and objectives of the American government, and to that extent it symbolizes the American component of the breakaway civilization with ties to the Nazis, in which they assist through their agents within the U.S. government and the OAS as they share their mutual agenda. The worldview warfare was what the Nazis meant for the effect of promotion of certain views, and scientists who hold them, is to create a matrix of interpretation, a matrix of perception, which matrix in turn opens up only certain avenues of decision and actions. During World War II, not only did the U.S. government allocate between 7 and 13 million annually for university and think tank studies of communications-related psychological, social psychology, communication effect studies, and the anthropological studies of foreign communication system, but major foundations, including the Carnegie, Ford, and Rockefeller foundations, are privately funded this research, thus gaining access to the results of these studies. A long-range extended psyops in the United States was planned by the Nazis. This was revealed in the 1944 edition of the French version of the German magazine Combat. An article by German General von Stubelnagel admitted not only that the current war was lost, but outline the long-range objective of an extended PSYOP. In the next war, which should take place within 25 years, the same mistakes must not be made. The principal adversary will be the United States, and the entire effort must be concentrated against this country from the beginning. Our defeat in the present war need not be considered except as an incident in the triumphant march of Germany toward the conquest of the world, and from now on we must give a defeated Germany the spirit of a future conqueror. What does a temporary defeat matter, though the destruction of the people and the wealth, material wealth in enemy countries? We are able to secure a margin of economic and demographic superiority with even greater than before 1939. If we succeed in doing this, the war will have been used, since it will enable us within the next 25 years to wage another war under better conditions. Our enemy will grow weary before we do. We shall have to organize a campaign of pity designed to induce them to send us needed supplies at the earliest possible moment. Above all that, we must hold on to the assets we have deposited in neutral countries. The present war will have been a march towards our supremacy. We have not to fear conditions of peace analogous to those we have imposed, because our adversaries will always be divided and disunited. In 1944, September 23rd, a Nazi U-boat was sunk delivering large cargoes of mercury, a key element for the anti-gravity craft propulsion. Nazi U-boat 859 on 4th of April 1934 at 440 hours left on the mission carried 67 men, 33 tons of mercury, sealed in glass bottles and watertight tin crates. The submarine was later sunk on the 23rd of September by a British submarine, HMS Trenchant, in the States of Malacca, and although 47 of the crew died, 20 survived. Some 30 years later, one of these survivors spoke openly about the cargo, and divers later confirmed the story on rediscovering the mercury. Why would a German submarine be transporting such a cargo so far from home, possibly delivering to the Nazi Antarctic base? In speaking technically with Mark McClandish in Washington, D.C., about the propulsion system of the alien reproduction vehicles, ARVs, it seems mercury is a key element for anti-gravity propulsion that is used in the ARVs, which he testified about. The central column of the ARV had a vacuum chamber with mercury vapor in it that conducts electricity but produces all kinds of ionic effects. These little molecules of mercury become charged in unusual ways. If you fire a tremendous amount of electricity through a mercury vapor, utilizing a Tesla coil configuration, there's something unusual that will happen in that process. He believed it's driving the energy in the vacuum out of the equilibrium, putting some kind of shock wave through it, providing partially mass-canceled lift to the craft. The U-boat may have been delivering the mercury to the Nazi Antarctic base as a key element for the Nazi Honenbrew anti-gravity craft, which are driven by powerful tachyon magneto-gravitic engines called Thule tachyonators, believed to be large spherical containers of mercury spinning around a vertical axis. Hitler and Himmler were exceptionally interested in ancient India and Tibet, set expeditions to both these places yearly starting in the 1930s in order to gain esoteric knowledge from ancient texts. Perhaps it's from these people the Nazis gained some of their scientific information on the principles of the ancient flying machines of India called Vimanas. Reference to the mercury engines can be found in the ancient Vedic text. It's called Samaranga Sudahatra. where a detailed description of the Mercury vortex engine states, inside the circular airframe, place the Mercury engine with its solar Mercury boiler at the aircraft center. By means of a power latent in the heated Mercury, which sets the driving whirlwind in motion, a man sitting inside may travel a great distance in the most marvelous manner. 4 strong Mercury containers must be built into the interior structure. When they have been heated by fire through solar or other sources, the Vimana aircraft develops thunder power through the Mercury. 1945, April 12th, President Harry Truman as the president. Hitler fakes suicide, escapes to Argentina. And is alive, it's the stated belief of Eisenhower, Stalin, and others. Harry Truman asked Soviet leader Joseph Stalin at the Potsdam Conference in 1945 if Hitler was dead. Stalin simply said no. In 1952, President Dwight Eisenhower said, "We've been unable to unearth one bit of tangible evidence of Hitler's death." Colonel Robert Thew, ONI, then NSA, flatly stated, "We, the intelligence community, knew that Hitler did not commit suicide." In 1945, FBI documents indicate awareness of Hitler's escape to Germany. Recently released FBI documents are beginning to show that not only was Hitler and Eva Braun's suicide faked, the infamous pair may have had help from the director of OSS himself, Alan Dulles. In one FBI document from Los Angeles, it's revealed that the agency was well aware of a mysterious submarine making its way up Argentine coast, dropping off high-level Nazi officials. The FBI knew, in fact, he was living in the foothills of the Andes. In a Los Angeles letter to the Bureau in August of 1945, an unidentified informant agreed to exchange information for political asylum. What he told agents was stunning. The only informant not only knew Hitler was in Argentina, he was one of the confirmed 4 men who met the German submarine. Apparently 2 submarines had landed on the Argentine coast. Hitler, with Eva Braun, was on board the second. The Argentina government not only welcomed the former German dictator, but also aided in his hiding. The Nazis had a comeback plan to infiltrate within the U.S. and the use of PSYOPs, worldview warfare, to gain control and hide their operations. Since the war was lost, the enemy lines meant quite literally a new kind of special guerrilla warfare to be waged from a post-war Nazi underground. Captured Nazi documents reveal they had a comeback plan. Their plan to regain power after the war revolved around using their friends and fascist sympathizers in other countries, particularly in the United States, so to do their bidding while rebuilding Germany. Documents note that as late as 1944, the Nazis were hoping for a Republican victory in the presidential election because they would get an easier peace. Second part of their plan involved provoking a war between the U.S. and Soviet Union, which would allow the Nazis to retake power in Germany without U.S. intervention. It is precisely the existence of such network and personal connections that the Nazis were counting on as to revealed by their documents outlining the long-range plan for the extensive worldview warfare. The head of Nazi intelligence and his spy network of thousands cuts a deal with Alan Dulles to work within the U.S. intelligence. Major General Reinhard Goering, head of the Nazi intelligence, surrenders and cuts a deal for himself and 5,000 Nazis. We got a reference here of Nazis in the CIA. Reinhard Goering, known as Hitler's spy master, had overseen a huge organization of more than 3,500 spies. He knew early in 1944, "I told my more intimate colleagues that I considered the war lost and we must begin thinking of the future and plan for the approaching catastrophe. Galen knew the Americans would cut a deal for him and his group to obtain microfilmed and Soviet intelligence document he had hid throughout the Austrian Alps 2 months before Germany's surrender. Galen had made these arrangements far in advance. Galen had coordinated a deal with Alan Dulles within the American intelligence community. Dulles knew Galen was coming in April, 1 month before the war ended, and 45 days before Galen surrendered to Captain Bokar. Alan Dulles ordered aid to begin talks with General Galen through intermediaries in Berlin. General Wild Bill Donovan, head of the OSS and the station chief in Europe, Alan Dulles offered a deal in order to obtain the Soviet intelligence files, and within 18 months, the Galen org, resurrected from the original Nazi spy network, had been installed in West Germany to act as the eyes and ears of the newly created CIA. Though he agreed not to hire any former Gestapo, SS, or SD members, he sought them out and put them on CIA payroll regardless of his promise, and the CIA did not stop him, which gave him the escape mechanism of the German war crime tribunals, and over 5,000 Nazis escaped mostly to Argentina and the surrounding areas in Latin America. Former OSS officer James Jesus Angleton, who later became CIA Chief of Intelligence, was the man responsible for providing the Nazis with their new identities before their departure from the detainment camp. Arlington worked directly for Alan Dulles. Garen falsified Soviet intelligence reports in order to maintain the payroll. Hang on a minute. Hello, Andrew. I'm still broadcasting. What can I do for you? Andrew. Well, you're still not coming through. Goodbye. Now, according to Victor Marchetti, former chief analyst on Soviet military capabilities and author of the CIA and the Cult of Intelligence, said the agency loved Galen because I'm not taking your call. Galen had make his money by creating a threat we were afraid of, so we would give him more money to tell us about it. In my opinion, the Galen organization provided nothing worthwhile for understanding. What can I do for you, Andrew?
Okay, yeah, this is the thing, Clay. I enjoyed the interview. The interchange was good. I liked it. I think, it was good. And I just want to alert you that I'm publishing other Christian books, one of the power books, one of the miracles, and the Psalms, to set the record straight for people that may believe those things. Okay, I'll be in touch about it, okay?
All right, sir. Try not to call me during my show. I'm doing a show.
Yeah, I know. I need to do that.
All right.
I'll see you later. Bye.
All right. Where were we? The result of what we were just speaking of Galen working with Alan Dulles and with the CIA, the result was a Cold War that lasted for almost half a century and cost American taxpayers alone over $8 trillion. Peacetime intelligence gathering had become big business, profitable not only to the growing intelligence organizations, but to the defense industry and the investors who financed both it and the government. Alan Dulles was responsible for protecting and laundering Nazi assets in America. Sullivan and Cromwell, the prestigious Wall Street law firm, in representing U.S. businesses with Nazi ties, and in particular to the role of one of its most famous members, Alan Dulles, in that venture. The arrangement was convenient that while some of the firm was representing corporations whose assets had been seized Under the Trading with the Enemy Act, because they operated as Nazi fronts, other members of Sullivan and Cromwell volunteered as the U.S. Justice Department prosecutors, officially titled alien property custodians. Allen Dulles, his OSS chief in Zurich, had used his position to protect himself and his clients from investigation for laundering Nazi funds back to America. Allen Dulles heads Operation Safe Haven, recruits Nazis into America. President Roosevelt entrusted the post-war investigation of American Nazi financial relationships, Operation Safe Haven. The head of Operation Safe Haven after the war was none other than Alice Dulles, who used his position to recruit Nazis. And in May of 1945, Operation Paperclip recruits a Nazi scientist into the NSA for employment by the United States into NASA. The Nazis were given false backgrounds to circumvent Truman's anti-Nazi policy. President Truman's order expressly excluded anyone found to have been a member of the Nazi Party and more than a nominal participant in its activities, or an active supporter of Nazi militarism, among them rocket scientist Werner von Braun, Kurt H. Debus, and Arthur Rudolph, and the physician Hubertus Strughold, each earlier classified as a menace to the security of the Allied forces. The Joint Intelligence Objective Agency, JIOA, worked independently to create false employment and political biographies of the scientists to circumvent Truman's anti-Nazi policies and allow them. Within our national security, they know that at the close of war, as all of the German scientists with knowledge did not come to this country. 1945, May 8, Germany surrenders. Victory at the end of the war that caused so many lives and hardships is what the American people wanted to hear, no doubt, and what our military and politicians wanted to claim had occurred. The Nazis had a philosophy of utilizing the least amount of resources and effort to achieve a given objective. In other words, working smart, not hard. With the United States, Great Britain, and Soviet Union's massive combined military resources, it would make sense that Germans had made a fallback plan to infiltrate, operating from an underground network, utilizing the least amount of resources to overcome the enemy, and to effect the greatest degree of infiltration, leading to the eventual complete takeover, thus accomplishing their original plan of world domination. Such a special warfare would have been impossible without their agents already within the United States intelligence community and the assistance of their pre-war financial structure that supported them, as well as the amount of wealth transferred within, which purchased hundreds of Nazi front corporations in the U.S. and abroad. All of which made their infiltration plan completely viable, operating over time to use their worldview warfare, the New World Order, on the American public, which would hide the infiltration and maintain the perspective that the United States victoriously won the war and the Nazis surrendered. Think again. On July 16th, 1945, humans detonate the first nuclear weapon near White Sands Missile Range, in New Mexico. This is the start of a large wave of UFO sightings, many near nuclear facilities, by extraterrestrials which appear to be concerned about the adverse effect of these weapons, possibly with an advanced understanding of how it affects life in several dimensions, far more than our current scientific understanding of the interconnectedness of all life systems. In 1946, the Rockefeller Foundation, rewriting official history to hide the historical facts of the banking cabal's connection to the Nazis, as well as to the connection to the occult. The Rockefeller Foundation spent $139,000 in 1946 to present an official history of the Second World War, which covered up the whole story of the U.S. bankers building up the Nazi regime, as well as the occult and mystical background of the Nazis, and many activities would bring future students of history into questioning who was behind what back then and what they're doing today. Also, many mysterious wartime expeditions conducted by all the combatant countries, especially Germany, were not entered into World War II history. One of the main sponsors of this manipulation of history was Rockefeller's own Standard Oil Corporation. And what have I told you? They don't want you to know we could go to the moon and back in a day without using a drop of oil. In 1954, a special congressional committee investigated the interlocking web of tax-exempt foundations to see what their impact were having on the American psyche. The committee was stumbled onto the fact that some of these groups had embarked upon a gigantic project to rewrite American history and incorporate it into new school books. Norman Dodd, the committee's research director, found in the archives of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace the following remarkable statement of purpose. The only way to maintain control of the population was to obtain control of education in the U.S. They realized this was a prodigious task, so they approached the Rockefeller Foundation with the suggestion that they go into tandem, and that portion of education which be considered as domestically oriented be taken over by the Rockefeller Foundation, and that portion which was ordered to international matters be taken over by the Carnegie Foundation. The Rockefeller Foundation agreed to take on the domestic portion of this task. The purpose of all this interest, of course, in history was to rewrite it. Dodd explained they decided that the success of the program and the manner in which American history was presented. They then approached four of the most prominent historians, such as Marion Charles Beard, with the suggestion that they alter the manner in which they were accustomed to presenting the project. They were turned down flat, so they decided they had to build a coterie of historians of their own selection. Congressional investigation found that Guggenheim, Ford, and Rockefeller Foundation and the Carnegie Endowment were working in harmony to control education in the United States. Foundations linked by the membership to funding to the plutocracy that once supported the Nazis. No doubt a major element in the plan for worldview warfare was the control of education to manipulate the view of the world. Falsifying the public's information in both the mainstream media and history taught in education should be a violation of the law, you'd think. Apparently it was not, leaving it wide open for this kind of control and abuse to falsely form a perception of the world to maintain the secrecy of their operations. Here are some of the common characteristics of Nazi regime. Dr. Lawrence W. Britt, following a careful study of the regimes of Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, Franco Spain, Salazar Portugal, Papalatos Greece, Pinochet Chile, and Suharto's Indonesia, Britt concluded that these fascist governments had observable similarities. Analysis of the 7 regimes reveals 14 common threads that link them to the recognizable patterns of national behavior and abuse of power. These characteristics were prevalent and more intense in some regimes than in others, but they all share at least some level of similarity. They sound sounding ominously close to what is happening in the United States. 1. Powerful and controlling expressions of nationalism, disdain for the importance of human rights, identification of enemies, scapegoats for a unifying cause, supremacy of the military and avid militarism, rampant sexism, a controlled mass media, obsession with national security, religion and ruling elite tied together, power of corporations protected, power of labor subsided or eliminated, disdain for the suppression and intellectuals and the arts, obsession with crime and punishment, rampant cronyism and corruption, and fraudulent elections. Sadly, historical amnesia is the norm, stated author Dr. Lawrence W. Britt. Now, next time I have a day open, I'll tell you about the 1947 January Operation High Jump, where Admiral Byrd is sent with a military task force to destroy the Nazi Antarctic base and are attacked by flying discs, causing heavy damage to his armada. We'll start there. We'll start in 1947 and take you all the way up today in this series. And this series will be in my next issue, the June issue of the Free American. If you want to get this kind of unbiased information far removed from mass media, you need to understand that they do not want you to support me. They do not want you to make a donation. They do not want you to help me. They're afraid that if I organize you, if by following me somehow we get organized as individuals, and we can restore the Constitution, we can understand what's being done to us, and we can understand and stop it. I am
Discover really going on in the news that mainstream media won't tell you. Are you frustrated with your elected politicians? Get the news behind the news at truthradio.com. At Truth Radio, you can listen live or listen to a large selection of archived programs on demand. Listen when you want to. truthradio.com. The truth is out there. All you have to do is open your mind and listen.
And open the pages of the freeamerican.com. God bless you.